Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to no matter where you are in the world. We wanted to greet you. Welcome to this edition of Primer Chats. And today we're going to be talking about what is strategy and how to be strategic, a topic that's so vital in the world that we live in today. My name is Audrey D. Lloyd. I'm joined by
Sandi Webster, Dr. Sandy.
So it's great to be here and to talk about one of my favorite topics. And I know, Sandy, you have a lot to say on this as a prior, well, not even a prior, I was going to say prior big business owner, but also a current business owner of your board as well. But strategy is so important to everything that we do. But many times people don't really realize that strategy is also essential for us as individuals. It's not just devising a strategy for a company. It's really thinking about how we want to live and how we want to really walk, along our journey. And so that's where strategy comes in. So I'll kick it over to you, Sandy, to kind of kick off some of the modes that we can actually take when we think about devising a strategy.
Well, first, I think, Audrey, people don't strategize or take the time to because I would say 90% of strategy is the planning, the thinking and planning. And we don't take the time to do that. We just want to get to it, which is really tactics. You're really executing the tactics. But for a real strategic person, they will sit and think through, how am I going to do this? What exactly is it that we want to do? How will we get there? What impact will it have on my customers or the people that I'm trying to get this message to? And that takes time. That takes time in the planning and especially in the thinking. Peggy and I used to take this trip to Malibu every year, and it was a healthy health trip. We go there to change our weight and do all this stuff that you think you're going to do. But we always did it in January, and it became a part of our strategic thinking. When we came back from that trip, our team would hate us because we will have talked through while we walked. We used to go on these hikes and we would talk about everything we want to do for that year for the business, things we didn't have time to really sit and think through before now. But on those walks, you have nothing but time to talk. And we'd come back with a strategic plan for the year for our team. And that's what people need to do is really take time to think and then take time to write it down because it really helps to write it down.
I love that, Sandy. And what comes up in me when I hear you say that is that we live in a world where people often will see others on social media and want to emulate everything they do and feel as if that they can take what that person has done for their particular strategy and do a lift and shift. So I love that you talked about thinking it through and actually planning and writing it down, because strategy, for it to be effective, be it a company or for an individual, it has to be individualized and unique to you. What is going to work for another person might not work for you because you just have different different ingredients, so to speak, in terms of what you bring to the table. And so, part of what we were going to talk about today, the top of the list, is really looking at who you are, but along with that, what is your focus? What is your focus? And that focus can take different forms in terms of how you go about building, imagining, or actually visualizing, imagining, and actually actualizing your strategy, right? So I'll kick it off with a couple, and then I'll leave it to you to bring up some. But we often think about strategies in business. We know that in the C-suite, that the executives, CEO, and that suite, everything that they do really emanates from a strategic plan, right? But we don't often think that for our own individual lives, whether it's annual, quarterly, or monthly, that we can actually have a plan or a lifelong plan. And so that plan can be a written document, that takes a look at the various swim lanes that contribute to that strategy in terms of who is the audience, what's the timing, what are we trying to accomplish, when are we going to actually execute it in terms of a date, what is the outcome that we're seeking, We're all very familiar with that if we have a business background. But in terms of our own particular strategy, we can have one that very much takes that format, but applies to us as well. But I think also a very big thing for strategy is intention. That intention means that you don't necessarily have to have the written document in front of you to execute. It's the mindset of saying, in the moment, being strategic, whether it's the step you're going to take that adds to that bigger strategy, or the intention that you're setting for a very discrete activity that you're doing, to say, what is it that I'm going to focus on? What are the steps that I'm going to take, and what's the outcome? Yeah. And in addition to that, another part of strategy is also thinking through, if you really think about it, the parts of the strategy that, how could I say, that you just want to remember, right? And that you want to make sure that doesn't get lost on paper, that you want to make sure that you bring alive, that you breathe breath into it. And I think this is a great segue to some of the ways that you actually capture strategy as well, Sandi.
Well, I think if you don't write it down, we just don't remember the things that we want to do. And you want to be consistent in what you do. So writing it down, you'll always look at it and it's, make $1 million by the end of the year, right? That's your big strategy. If you don't write it down, you'll say, how much did I say I want to make at the end of the year? Was it 500,000? So already you've changed your strategy because you can't remember what it was because it wasn't written down. At least when you write it down, you can go back. You have a frame of reference that you can go back to. And the whole team, if you have a team or if you have people you're sharing it with, they're all on the same page. No, we did not say we're doing 500. So it says right here, 1 million, right? And so everybody's on the same track with that. So I think it's important to write it down. And I was also thinking that on your personal side really impacts your business side. At least for me, it does. I could have this elaborate strategy that I'm going to make $1 million this year, and then I get sick. Goes to hell in a handbasket because I can't do anything when I'm sick. So that's a personal thing that you have to adjust for. So the goals you make and the strategies you make on your personal side, you should consider it how it impacts your business side. So for example, I do a vision board every year. I've done a vision board for, I don't know how long I can remember. And I have little vision board parties because I like all my friends' strategies and visions to be in line with mine. So we know we're going after similar things. And somewhere during the year, you realize this is not going to happen. This strategy that I put down is not going to happen. So I have a choice. If it's not, I already know it's not going to happen. It could not happen because there's a pandemic and ships are stopping from China and I'm just not going to get the thing that I wanted to get to be here, right? So things happen. But what do you do in that case? You have to pivot. That was the big word for the pandemic, pivot, pivot, pivot. You have to come up with some new strategies. And with that, sometimes you could keep your strategy, but you have to change your tactics, right? So it's the bullet point downwards from your strategy needs to change. I still might want to make $1 million. And there were a lot of people who made $1 million during the pandemic because they shifted their tactics. They went from making dresses to making face masks, right? And they were the first to pivot really fast. And they did make their $1 million, not in the way they originally thought, but they made money during the pandemic. So a lot of it is closely tied together, the strategy and the tactical.
Yes, yes. And, back to what I said earlier about lift and shift, I love what you were talking about with pivot, because a strategy has to be dynamic. You can't write a strategy and put it in the drawer, nor can you have a set mindset and lock it in to say, this is what I'm going to do and this is how it must play out. You have to be flexible and agile, and you have to be in the now, right? So in the now, you understand, what the environmentals are and what's going on and what people really need. And
Well,
so,
Audrey, when you think of strategy, people always think it's the thing that you write down, but there's so many levers that are being pulled on your strategy. Economics, stuff changes in the economy that you can execute the strategy that you originally thought of. I'm going to hire 100 people this year. Right now, there's a problem with labor in the workforce. The economics have shifted. People used to go into work. Now if you're not offering them work from home option, it's not happening. You can't get those people. People in very particular industries are getting the jobs. So there's a shift from other industries over to where the jobs are. Well, I'm sitting over here in my old industry and I have this big elaborate strategy. It's not going to happen,
yes,
right?
so your
So there are
strategy.
a lot of outside forces that are impacting your strategy. There's a storm, there's a hurricane, in Florida, right? You planned on doing a conference in Florida and you have all your stuff planned and your money's done and the hotel is booked and people pay. There's a storm in Florida. You go tell me how you're going to have that when there's a storm going on. You have to change your strategy or the tactics that goes with it.
Yes, and I love the way you said that. So essentially, your strategy has to be a living and breathing document, so to speak, right?
Yes,
That
yes.
it has to be very much steeped in what's going on in the now. It can't just be written in a
Updated,
vacuum.
updated regularly, maybe once, twice a year. If you have a company or a business where you're holding monthly meetings with your team, your strategy should be up on that board all the time. Are we
Yes,
still on track for this? Yes, we are. Or no, we're not. If we're not okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to change this? How are we going to move this around? It should be literally a living, breathing document.
absolutely. And I think, everything that we've said so far is, I'd like to say, more higher level, right? So just getting into the weeds, I mean, some people might be listening and thinking, oh, this all sounds good, but where do I start? How do I make this real for me? Right. So we talked a little bit about the importance prior to coming on, the importance of looking at yourself and thinking about your past, your present, and your future, right? So the strategy has to be unique to you and the strategy has to be responsive to you. So you do need to take a look at, what is my history, right? And when you're devising that strategy, if you know yourself very well, and say, for example, you see as a best practice, many people are doing X, Y, and Z, but based on your history, that might not work for you. Or maybe you don't have the skill set or the capabilities, right? Or the financials to do what other people are doing. So you take what you have learned from your past to inform where you are right now in the present, and you take a realistic view of what the present looks like. And then, to your point, you really try to envision, what is the realistic future, right, that I'm planning for as well. So it looks like you were going to say something, Sandy. So let me pause for a minute.
No, I was thinking as you were talking about that we know ourselves. We do know what we can do and what we can't do. But there are things that, again, are outside of you that impacts what you do and what you can do. So, for example, I know that I can go in and do a marketing strategy, with my eyes closed, right? Pretty much with my eyes closed. However, I also know that I haven't done marketing in the nitty-gritty marketing for years. So I can write the strategy, but the tactics to execute on that, I better give that to somebody else. I really, and I know that about myself. I'm not going to write something. So then in my strategy, I have to build in, how am I going to pay for this? It's not that it's not doable. It's doable, but not by me, by someone else. And that's usually going to cost some money somewhere down the line. How am I, if this is really what I need, How will I get that money? How will I get that person that I need to help me execute my strategy, right? And it could be I'll hire someone from the Philippines who's less costly than someone in the US. Now, if I had something in my strategic plan that I'm only going to hire US workers, that's an issue. You have to align, things have to be in alignment, because you have to really, and this is where the thinking part comes through, right? You have to think about all the different sides of this equation of the thing that you're trying to do. What
Yeah.
will impact it negatively and positively?
Yeah, and just to pick up off what you were saying about, whether you have to get talent or, how you're going to procure it, basically what you need to inform your strategy to make that strategy real is that, so many times in the business realm that you will hear, particularly in HR, they'll talk about, grow, borrow, or buy talent, grow, borrow, or buy talent. And
Yeah.
guess what? In our individual realm, when we think about what we need to inform our strategy, we might have to grow it, we might have to borrow it, or we might have to buy it as well. So I
Yes.
think what you were saying there, to keep that into consideration, that your strategy many times is not just about what you can do, but all of the intersections of things that you need, whether it's social media or it's regular marketing or whatever, that's going to enable that strategy as well.
And a big factor is money. How much money do I have to execute this strategy? Well, you can barter. That's the other grow, borrow, buy. You can barter.
Or do it yourself.
But if you don't have the skill set to do it yourself, which is what I was saying about my marketing, I haven't done some of this thing. I don't know how to do Facebook ads. Like, I just don't. I don't want to know how to do Facebook ads. So that's a skill set that I will buy,
Right.
right? How much and from whom and where is a different thing. But I know that's a skill set I would have to buy to make this strategic plan come through.
Yes, but I think right there, Sandy, you said something really interesting, when it comes to the financials, that I feel like many times people think they're being strategic and they put a lot of things on the deck, but they actually don't really know where they want to go, right? So before you spend any money, whether it's beg, borrow, buy, whatever that lever is that you want to pull, that you got to think about, where are you today and where do you want to go with that strategy, right? And that purchase that you're going to make, is that going to pay off for you? Is it going to work out for you?
How do you know that it's paying off? What are the metrics that you're going to use to decide, is this paying off? I was on somebody's mastermind group last week, and it was about real estate. And she said, people are always worried about how much they spend. When I'm buying a house, oh my God, it's $250,000. Oh my God, it's. But what they should really worry about is, what does it get you? What
Right.
is the return on your investment? If you're
Mhm.
spending $250,000 and this is going to get you $10 million, is it not worth it to you to spend?
Right.
Right? If you're going to spend $10 and it's only going to get you $12, is that a good investment? So you can't really think about the how much without thinking about the back end of what is going to be the return on this, right? I can go borrow it from the bank if I know I really need 400,000 to make this deal happen. You can go borrow it from the bank. What collateral do I have to give to the bank? Are there different sources that I can borrow it from? Because I know the thing I know for sure, like Oprah, is if I get that $400,000, I'm going to make $10 million,
Right. Right.
right?
But you
So
also said something that's really interesting too, is that, when you hear other people talking about their spends or what they're going to allocate to their strategy, is it comes back to, for you, what is going to be meaningful,
Yeah.
realistic, and doable for you? Because we all have different thresholds, right? So for some people, they would think, oh, I would never spend $25,000 on anything. Why would you
Coach.
spend that? Right, right. I would never spend $25,000 on learning how to be a performance speaker. That's just too much
Yeah.
money.
Yes, or taking a class.
Right, but everyone is unique and everyone is different and everyone has that threshold, right? To know what's going to be high or low, and everyone has a different metric in terms of what is the ROI, what will they get out of it, right? So
Right.
it goes back to knowing yourself, where are you and where do you want to go, and what is that metric of success? But also I would add to that, it's an incremental metric, right? Because the $400,000 that multiplies into the millions takes time, but you could have a near term, a midterm, and a long term metric, right? In terms of those thresholds that you want to meet with your investment. So I
And that's
think
part of your
that,
metric. Those individual thresholds are your metrics. Am I going to make 100,000 in year one, 250 in year two? Those are the metrics that you have to devise.
yes, absolutely. So we're sort of, it feels like we're skipping around a little bit, but we're actually not, because I think we're talking about the things that are material that a lot of people don't really think about, right? Having that written plan or having that vision board, but how are you going to resource it? And whether it be with money or whether it would be with talent that other people give. But I think the fundamentals also, the traditional old school, I sound like a T-Rex in saying this, but it does come back to, what is your vision? What are the objectives that you have? Right. And I would like to say, many people will think what they want to get out of that strategy, but I think a values is going to rear its head too. It's not just the what, but it's the how you go about doing it. And it goes back to what I said about, you can't look at what other people are doing and think you can lift and shift that and apply that to you. It's like my dad would say, people have things, but you don't know how they got it, right? And you don't know if the tactics or the behaviors, the values that other people have will work for you. So again, it comes back to knowing yourself, of what are you trying to achieve, but how are you going to do it? And I think the how is in the actioning, but it's also the ethics and values that go hand in hand with that. Or whether you say, I really don't care, by any means necessary, I'm going to get this done. But for some people, they are successful, but it's not enough. It's the path that they also took to that success that's going to be the most satisfying for them as well in meeting that objective.
And I've heard people say, business owners don't need a strategic plan. I have it all in my head. And that's not true. We all need to formalize and put down, what we're going to do so it resonates with us all the time. And the first time you go for a loan and somebody asks you for a business plan, let's say, and it wasn't in your strategy to have a business plan, to have, I can't be bothered. It's 100 pages. There are one-page strategic plans, one-page business plans out there that will get you to the same exact place as that 100-page thing. But when you get called on, you have to have the tools. You have to equip yourself with the tools that you can easily state what your strategy is, what your vision is, and deliver that to someone. You're much more believable when you have it that you can give to them. And I know sometimes I show up with people and they'll ask me for something and I'm like, oh, let me send that to you right now. And I go and I click on my computer and they're in shock. Like, I thought you were going to say, let me go create something and send it to you. But my strategy was to have all my stuff up front even before I gave you a call, right? So that shock, to me, it's unwarranted, but it tells me a lot about you, that you don't have your stuff all together all the time.
Mhm. Yeah, well, I think they don't have the fundamentals, right? So there's a lot of things to get done, but I think what we're talking about is really important, especially in this day and age where there's a lot of busyness, right? And we hear that that phrase executive decision making, that people feel like they have what 5 or 6 piles or more of things that they're constantly doing. But to your point, I think when you have something that's written, you have the intention, you have it in the back of your mind. And I really do think that intention and writing things down and having a focus is very powerful, especially in a very busy world. That's really critical for knowing, where you're going.
And the last thing I'm going to say on this is you could write it down, you could keep it in your head, but if you don't execute it or try to execute it, it means nothing. It means nothing. You really are missing out on the biggest piece of all, which is to get it done. You could go through the whole year and you thought about it, you wrote it out, you did, and nothing, absolutely nothing on your vision board or on your strategic plan got done. And so you'll be right back where you started.
Well, I think that's where many people fall down, right? That, it's like the person who wants to get the job and they spend 3 months preparing their resume. 3 months preparing their resume when all you got to do is send it out. There's many reasons why, right? They don't send it out. It could be fair, it could be procrastination, it could be perfectionism, etc. Right? But I do think you're right that it does come down to the action. But I will say this with the action. And I was having a conversation with someone that I was coaching earlier in the week, and I was talking about the very same subject of strategy. When you're strategic, it doesn't mean that you have to do everything on all at once either, right? We talked about the timing. We
Yes,
talked about also the ability to ensure that you're synchronized with what's going on. But I think you have to also to be strategic, synchronized within yourself. And when I say that, I mean, sometimes you pause and wait, and it might seem that you're not going to go as far, but it comes back to what I said earlier, that you have to also know yourself. You know yourself, but you should also know the market, right?
yes,
So
yes,
you might make a decision right now, there's short term, there's midterm, and there's long term, that you're going to do something a little slower in the short term and double up maybe in the midterm or in the long term. And if it gets you to where you're going to go and where you need to be, that's great. And I just think there's caution to saying, I have this thing and I need to do everything all at once. It's
correct.
timing and pacing. I think that bodes for everything in life as well. That's a little bit of wisdom that I would like to say goes hand in hand with being strategic.
With timing, you have every day is time. So if you don't lay out what you're doing this month versus next month, some things you have to build up to. In order to really fully execute, you have to do it incrementally over time. And it might take you 3 months. So you're going to have those baby steps, those goals, those tactics for month 1 through month 3. And then in month 4, when you have everything, then you can start executing against your strategy. But yes, timing is very important in that.
Love that, Sandy. All right. So should we recap really quickly? I think we covered a lot. So we talked about the fact that strategy, when we think about it, it goes back to focus, and you can actually, create that strategy, be it on paper. You could do it, in your personal life and in business. You can do it by setting your intention. We talked about your vision board and how you can actually create that strategy through pictures, right? But we also talked about the need to really understand who we are, yeah, our past, our present, and our future. We talked about ensuring that we have the resources to enable that strategy, and we might need to grow it, borrow it, buy it, or do it ourselves. And in addition to the fact that we need to understand what our metrics of success might be, and that those metrics can be incremental, that they doesn't have to necessarily mean that we envision what it's going to be at the very, very end, that there might be steps that we take along the way that will get us there. And to be mindful of both the ROI, but also our threshold, right?
Yeah.
That our threshold might be a little bit different than the next person's threshold. So we have to, again, know what our tolerance level is, what we can afford, what we can do, etc. And then it all comes really down to execution. Doesn't make any sense to have a great strategy if we don't actually act on it.
Yeah.
Is that a good recap?
Yes, I think that sums it up very nicely. And they can always reach out to us if they have questions. You can reach me at sandy@sandiwebster.com, and they can reach you, Audrey.
At bold, well, it's bold, BOLD, at audreydloyd.com.
See you next time.
See you next time. Bye-bye for now.